Hello, my name is Sarah Payne and welcome to my sewing room. Now I'm going to do a tutorial now on a pattern free off the shoulder top, this one. This has actually proved to be one of the most requested items that I've ever covered on any of my shows. So I thought I would record it for you now so that people can stop emailing me asking me how I made it. So here we go. Now the first thing you need to do is pick your fabric. Now you want something that's going to drape nicely. This is actually a stretch polyester which works beautifully, and because it's a stretch polyester it doesn't actually need overcasting the edges. This has got a beautiful drape, but this is a polyester that is going to fray. So in order to keep this stable, when I wash it I will have to overcast the finished seams. I can either do that with an overlocking machine or an overcasting foot on my sewing machine. So first of all you need to think about your measurements. Okay, so we need to cut two pieces of fabric, one for the front and one for the back. They'll be the same size, and one for each sleeve, so it's 4 pieces. Okay, now first of all you need to measure the distance from sort of along this line of your body where you want it to, where you want your top to finish, this line down the front of you to where you want it to end. It's a good idea to be a little bit generous at this point, because if it's too long you can always chop it off once it's ready. Once you've finished it, you can't actually add it on. That's really difficult. So what I did was I measured from here to where I wanted it to end. For me that was 18 inches, and then I added an extra 2 inches to the top for this fold over here and for the seam at the bottom. Now the one I'm going to make today, I want to make it slightly longer, so I'm going to cut it 22 inches because I want it to come just a little bit further. Important to note that we're not actually taking a measurement of our bust at this point to work out the width, because, well, you can do, but you need a bit of ease. What I actually did was I grabbed my fabric and I sort of draped it to see how it would hang. I then took my bust measurement and added 6 inches to it so that I've got some movement, but you can see this overlaps quite a bit. You can make it tighter by giving it less, ease. Also, if you are going to have it sitting over your hips and your hips are slightly wider, because this piece is a square, you'll need to go with your hip measurement if your hips are larger than your bust. Okay, because this is just one square piece. So for me, for my measurements, I've actually cut mine 22 inches long that way and 25 inches that way. Okay, so I've cut 2 of those the same. Now the sleeve measurements, first of all you want to measure from the top of where it's going to sit on your shoulder, so sort of mid shoulder here, right the way to the underneath of your armpit, and that's going to give you this distance here. Now for me that was 6 inches. I then added an inch to for the top, for the fold over, so that takes me to 7 inches, and then you decide how far down your sleeve you want this little extra bit under here to come. Now this I added a further 2 inches, but I've decided with my new one I'm going to make it a little bit longer. So for my new piece I'm actually cutting it 12 inches. So this one was 6 plus about 3, so about 9 inches. For my new top I'm going to cut it at 12 inches. Then you want to measure your bicep around the widest part of your bicep, because you obviously want to be able to get up over your arm. Remember it's elasticated as well, so there is ease in that. So measure your bicep and add 6 inches to that. So my sleeve part is now 12 inches long and 20 inches wide for me. Okay, so this will go round one arm, and you can see it's going to kind of bunch up quite a bit, and it's going to be relatively long, probably as long as down to my elbow. But again, if I try it on, when I put the elasticated top in, if I try it on and it's too long, I can take that off. Okay, so how do we construct it? First of all, you've now got 2 large squares, or sorry, rectangles for your front and back, and you've got 2 sleeves. So the first thing I'm going to do is work out which is the top and which is the bottom of my fabric. Mine is kind of directional, but not hugely so. So I'm just going to make sure that I've got both pieces facing the right way up. So for me, that goes that way. Is it that way? No, that's my top there. Also, my front and my back of my fabrics are very similar, so I'm going to have to keep an eye on that as well. So the next thing that I will do is, with right sides together and ensuring that my sleeve is also right sides together. Just put that down here. Right sides together and the right way up. I'm going to put them like that. I am then going to put them right sides together. This will be the top, this will be the bottom of the sleeve. I will mark a line at 7.5 inches with my marker. So 2, 4, 6, 7.5 inches. And then I will sew from the top to that line, working with 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, tacking, back stitching at the top and at the bottom, but not going beyond that line. So there we go. That is my seam, and you'll see that it's open at the bottom. So now I'm going to, this is the front piece, now I'm going to take the other sleeve and I'm going to put that on the other side, right sides together again, and making sure that my pattern is the same way up. And pin, and again mark at 7.5 inches. 5, 6, 7.5, which is just there. And you can see this is fraying quite a lot, so I will deal with these seams soon. Back stitch. So now what I've got is my front with 2 sleeves attached here and here, and stopping again at the 7.5 inch mark. So what I'm going to do now is take the other piece and put that right sides together, again making sure that I've got the pattern the right way up. With this it's very hard to tell, to be honest, with this particular one, because there's so many different bits on it. There we go, it goes that way. So now we take the sleeve and attach the sleeve here to this one. Like this, and then we take the other side and we attach that to the other sleeve, again pinning. So when I've sewn them together, I end up with something that resembles this. So it's big triangle, little triangle, big triangle, little triangle, big triangle. Square, square, not triangle. Okay, now at the moment it looks massive, and it will be massive, and that's because we've got a lot of elastic to bring in here so that we get a lovely drape. So remembering to stop 7.5 inches from the top. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew these pieces together, and then I'm going to put the overcasting foot on my machine. I've got an overcasting stitch on this machine, and then I'm just going to overcast those edges that I've already sewn so that everything is nice and neat. And then I'll see you back here in a minute. Okay, so I have stitched, as I said, those sleeves in place, and I've actually used my overcasting foot, which is on the machine at the moment. If I just take it off, the overcasting foot, I'm using my Brother here, the FS130QC, and for this particular machine and for most Brother machines it's actually foot G. And it's got a little G in there. You won't be able to see it here, but in there's a little embossed G, and it also has a metal prong across here, which means when you are overcasting it holds everything neat and tidy. Now the overcasting stitch I've chosen to use for this is, on this machine it's stitch number 6, but it is an overcasting stitch for a light to medium weight fabric, because this is quite floaty. It's not a heavy duty one. And I have actually overcast while I was at it. I've done the sleeve to the end, and then I've done the body all the way down to the bottom of the top. Okay, so the hem. I've not overcast the top and the bottom yet because I might trim those down, I don't know. But so what I've got now is, if I pull this together, you can see here we're starting to get a sleeve. So the next step is, when we stopped at the 7.5 inch point and we did our back stitch, we've now got a flap of fabric here, and then we've got both sides of the front and the back, or we've got a side of the front and the back. So what we need to do is match up those points there. And what I do is I go from under the arm, so from the armpit to the bottom of the sleeve, and then back to the armpit down the side. So first of all I'm going to pin those two pieces together quite carefully because I really don't want them to move. And I'm going to stitch from that point. So you see, this is the front and back of the shirt. If I turn it this way, there's your arm. That's the armpit. We sew down here to 7.5 inches, and that's where we stop. So now we are going to sew from the armpit out, and then from the armpit down the side of the bodice. Okie dokie. So just get it all lined up, because what we don't want is a hole. So we have to have it starting at the point where we previously finished. So I'm just going to go back to a straight stitch, and I'm using a straight stitch and not a stretch stitch for this, because there is no stretch in this fabric whatsoever. There is a lot of fray, but there's no stretch, so I don't need to worry about a stretch stitch. I'm going to stitch forward a little bit, and to avoid getting a hole I'm then going to stitch backwards. And again to the end of the sleeve. So I've now created the tube for the sleeve. So the next point is to take those again. And now I'm going to sew from that point. So we're doing basically a Y-shaped seam, as you would in quilting. And then sew down the side of the body. So I want to make sure that I'm taking all the other bits out of the way, because I don't want to catch any of the previous seams, but I do want to ensure that I start and end at the end of that line of stitching. So just carefully lining it up, doing a couple of stitches forwards, 2 stitches forwards, then 2 stitches back. Actually I did 3 there, so let's just move it forward a little bit. And now I'm going to sew to the bottom. And there we go, we've got a sleeve. Now if I turn it through, actually I have a little hole just in the centre there, because looking at this, I didn't start, I've actually started a stitch down. Let's see where that is. It's just under here, under the arm. So I'm going to go back and stitch that up. So it's a good idea to check. It doesn't matter if you've got a little hole, as long as you go back and fix it. And to be honest, it's because if you've got a hole, it will be a weakness. Nobody's going to see it all the way under your arm. Right, let's have another look. There we go. I've got no hole there whatsoever. So I now have a completed sleeve. Well, a completed sleeve shape, along with the body of my top. So there's one sleeve. So next what I need to do is I'm going to continue and do the same on the other side. So match up the two seams for the sleeve at the 7.5 inch marked point. So from the armpit to the bottom of the sleeve, and then from the armpit to the bottom of here. And then the next thing I'm going to do, because what we need to do now is add the channel for the top, because once we've done that we can try it on. Okay, so what I'm going to do before I come back is I'm going to overcast all the way round the top seam, so that we can then get on with making the channel for our elastic. Okay, so I'm back from overcasting all the way around the edges of my top and I've also been using the iron, and I have pressed over the channel that my elastic's going to go into. Now the elastic I'm using, this is 3/4 inches wide, so I have added 1/2 inch to that, so my channel is 1¼ inch wide, because I want to be able to get this through. If I did it the same size and I was even slightly off, you'd never get your elastic through. If you make it too big, it can twist inside. So that's what I've done. Now the length of my elastic, I've taken a piece and I have wrapped it around my shoulders where I want it to finish, and I've put it under a bit of tension, because obviously I need my top to stay up. So I've also given myself, so it would be comfortable about there, but I've given myself an extra inch or so for sort of movement, and I'm going to sew these bits together. This is actually 40 inches in my case. So, no it's not, it was 35 inches. Hang on, forgotten already. 36 inches. Okay, so this is 36 inches long to go around my shoulders, but keep taut. Again, if you find when you try it on it's too loose, you'll try it on before we close up the channel, so you can pull it out, chop a bit off. It's better to have a little too much, again, because it's easy to take off, it's hard to put on. So what I've then done is I've pressed my fabric over at 1¼ inch all the way round the top, so around the sleeves and everywhere. What I'm going to do now is I've changed the colour in my machine to a kind of peachy dusky pink, okay, because I'm going to top stitch this. That means it's going to be visible. So I've picked a colour that is not too obvious, you know. I've not chosen a white, for example. Now you can also pin this if you want, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to then sew all the way round the outside of my top, catching the bottom of that channel. So I happen to have a mark on my machine that gives me a line where I want to keep the right hand side, so that I will pick up and catch those bottom ends. I'm starting on a seam, and I'm going to go forward a couple of stitches and then backwards, just to secure my threads, because I don't want anything to sort of come undone in the first wash. And then we are going to sew all the way round the top And just keep it nice and smooth, because this stitching is going to be visible. So you don't want it to go sort of veering off. And remember, we are stitching from the top. And every now and again, you could just double check that it's going to fit by holding your elastic up against it. But hopefully, if you have measured it all correctly, and you're keeping everything nice and smooth, running through your machine, now, I've sewn all the way around to the top and I'm almost back to the beginning, but I want to leave a gap of about 3 inches in the casing so that I can thread my elastic through. So I'm going to get about 3 inches. Now this is going to be on the back over the shoulder. So the chances are, especially once the elastic is in there, it's going to rouge up so much that you won't actually be able to tell. And we will slip stitch that or stitch that close when we're finished. So the next thing we want to do is get our elastic and put a safety pin on one end. Now I found when I was making my skirt that I accidentally opened up the pin. I had it this way and I was pulling it and I accidentally opened it up, and then I lost my elastic, had to start all over again. So it was suggested to me on Facebook that I actually put it through this way up, because then I'm pulling through the top end and not the end with the clasp. That's what I'm going to do. So I'm just going to find my channel again. What I like to do as well is get a pin and pin the other end of the elastic to the outside of the case, well, on the inside, but the casing, so I can't accidentally pull it all the way through. It's a nightmare if you get round to the other end and find out that you've pulled the whole lot through. So now we're going to feed it inside, get the pin facing the right way, because the pin is going to allow me to easily pull it through. So let's get it started. It can be a bit tricky just to get it started, and this is why you'll be glad that you've actually made a little bit more space in your channel, because if it's tight you won't be able to get the elastic through. So continue feeding it on until we come round to the other side. And now we're coming all the way around to the other end. Okay, you can see it's very tight at the moment, but that's because I've got all of this still to feed through. Now what I want to make sure I haven't done is twist the elastic inside the casing, because if I do that, this will not lie flat, because the elastic will be bunched up inside it. So I'm just doing a quick check and I haven't. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take both ends and I'm going to put one on top of the other like this, and I'm going to stitch them together. What I will do then is pull it inside and try it on. If the elastic is too long, I can just hook it back out again, cut it, and then sew the next 2 pieces together. So let's just trim those threads off. So you can see that's nice and secure there, because what you don't want is for it to come apart inside. So now let's pull all of that inside, all the elastic inside the channel. And even the bunching out. Okay, because I want the similar amount of bunching on the front and on the back when it comes to the elastic. So here we go. Now at the moment the channel is still open, so it's bulging, but you're now getting a sense of what your top is going to look like. There are my sleeves, here's the shoulder. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go downstairs and I'm going to try it on. I'm going to decide if my sleeves are the right length and whether the top is the right length, and whether I've got my elastic right. So I will see you back here in a moment once I've tried it on. Okay, so I've tried my top on, and I'm happy with the elastic around the neckline. So the next stage will be to top stitch the opening closed. But what I do have to make sure is that I don't accidentally catch the elastic when I'm stitching it. So what I do is I have a clip it to the top of the casing with a wonder clip, like that, so that when I sew across there I'm not actually going to catch it, because if I do it won't move freely around the neck casing. So change back to my straight stitch. I'm going to go forwards a little bit, backwards. Now if you're not particularly confident with top stitching, don't worry too much, because you're not really going to see it, because by the time the elastic is all ruched up, you know, it's not hugely visible, as long as you picked a colour which kind of blends in. So I'm going to go back a bit and then forwards. Right, so now that is all stitched. So I also, when I tried it on, I checked out the length. Now I'm happy with the length, but something you need to be aware of is, because the front and the back are the same square, you'll find that the front tends to ride up a little higher than the back. Once you've decided which is your front and which is your back, you can make a little adjustment, which I did do. I just took about that much off the back so that it was nice and straight along the back. I've also, because I want to get this finished and I'm, you know, in a bit of a hurry, I've used my overlocker. So I have then overlocked my edges of the sleeves, and I've overlocked all the way around the trimmed bottom. This means that it's going to be much quicker for me to finish off my top. I'm just going to take that out of the way, because what I want to do now is fold over my hem on the sleeve. I'm going to do about, I'd say that's a good half an inch fold, and top stitch that from the front. So turn this the right way out. Now the overcasting stitch, or the overlocking that I've done around all the exposed hems, means that this is no longer going to fray, because this fabric was fraying everywhere. I've got bits of it all over. What I will also do before I stitch this is press this so that I've got a nice sharp edge to follow. Then we'll go back to the sewing machine onto here and then top stitch all the way around for both sleeves and the bottom. So I'll see you back here in a minute. Okay, so I'm back and I've pressed all of my seams inside, and as I said, because I've overlocked, nothing's going to fray. If I hadn't overlocked, I'd probably have to do it again so that all the raw edges were captured inside. The other thing you could do is actually use bias tape, use bias binding tape, and put that over the edges, and that would seal your raw edges in. But as I said, I've overlocked or overcast, and now I'm going to start with my top stitch. And I'm going to start from the seam. It's always a good idea to start from the seam under the arm, because that is the least visible place, is just under here. So, you know, if you do make a bit of a mess, then nobody's going to see it. You could also, of course, do a blind hem if you have a blind hem foot. There's no reason why you can't do that. However, I feel that this fabric is quite busy, so the fact that I'm top stitching is not really going to be of note. If it was plain, I would think either of doing a top stitch in a decorative colour, or even twin top stitch. That would be nice. With your twin needles, do 2 lines, you know, like you see on your jeans. That would be quite nice. Or use an invisible thread. If you've got a good quality invisible thread, you can put that on a top stitch. Or you would, as I say, blind hem it. So we come back to the beginning. Now another way of finishing off is, before you back stitch, is reduce the length of your stitch right down. I'm stitching at 2.5, but I'm reducing it down now to about 0.8 rather, and then backwards and then forward. So it is moving slightly, but hardly moving at all. So that's not going to come undone. The other option is, obviously, if you're making a wedding dress, you would sew these threads in, but we're just making a little top to wear on a sunny day. So there we go. There's my first sleeve completed. Oh, I've got a loose thread somewhere. Oh, it's gone. There you go. So there is my sleeve. Now, if you're concerned about the elastic moving about, what you can do is, once you've tried it on and you're wearing it, you could arrange the elastic and then do a line of stitches where your seam is here, up through your elastic, here and here, and the same at the back, and then it's not going to move within the channel. It will stay at the front and back. But to be honest, I've worn this a ton of times now, and I just put it on, sort of move it about, and I'm good to go. And every time I wear it, people say, oh, I like your top, where did you get that? So now you will be able to make your very own in whatever fabric you like. Bear in mind, the wider you make the original square or the original rectangle, the wider it is. Mine was 25 inches wide. The wider you make it in comparison to your body measurements, the more floaty it will be. Okay, so the narrower you make it, the more fitted it would be. I would make sure that you add at least 3 inches to your measurements, to your bust measurements. Otherwise you might find you can't breathe, and that's really not a good look. But you can make it longer. You could actually continue it to the floor and make this a full length, you know, frock, off the shoulder frock for the summer. Make it to the floor, and then perhaps put a bit of little belt round the middle. That might be quite nice. Well, I'm going to stay here and finish this top, and then I'll take a picture of me wearing it for the end of this YouTube video. I hope you've learnt something today. I hope you have a go, because it's great fun to make your own clothes, and it's much easier when you haven't got to follow a pattern. So if you do make one of these off the shoulder gypsy tops, please do let me know. You'll find me on Facebook as Sarah Payne Quilter. I'm also on, I've got a website, sarahpayne.co.uk, and you'll also find me on Instagram and Twitter. Just search for Sarah Payne Quilter. And I hope to see you back here again soon in your new top.